Hello everypony, and welcome back to another video of mine. That's probably the last time I'll ever do an intro like that, but whatever, who cares? Today I'll be trying something that I've really never done before on the channel that I'll be calling an R&R, also known as a rankin' review. Basically, I'll be talking about each episode of Digital Circus in chronological order, and giving my thoughts on and explaining what I think of them before ranking them all at the end. Two things to get out of the way first, though. Firstly, naturally, this will contain spoilers for all of the Amazing Digital Circus until episode 5. So if that's something you want to avoid for one reason or another, I suggest that you leave and come back after catching up. And secondly, before I start, everything I say in this video is just my opinion and how I feel about the show so far, so don't feel obligated to agree with everything I say. Or anything. With all that out of the way, I think it's only appropriate that we start off with the episode that started it all, the pilot.
What the is going on?
The pilot is an interesting case to me because while it's easily iconic, memorable, and full of potential on its own, I'd argue it's actually the weakest episode that we've gotten of this series as a whole yet. My main issue with the pilot, especially on rewatch, is just how repetitive it can get with the whole, whoa, random, crazy, what's going on? Where am I? Where's the exit thing it's going for? Like, yeah, it's kind of needed, but I still feel like they overdo it a little bit, mainly, if not entirely, with the dialogue. The main circus members are all perfectly memorable and unique in their own ways, despite not having much more than their surface-level traits or shtick. Or at least not yet. The animation is great for an indie pilot, the comedy's mostly good, and the music ranges from haha, yeah, this is nice, to holy shit! It's definitely not for everyone, and it can be a little bit too much at times, but overall I think it's a perfectly solid, nice introduction to this digital world, the people trapped inside of it, and the wacky existential things they all have to live with.
Farewell, good nights. I have every faith in you.
Despite being only the second episode, Candy Carrier Chaos is already a noticeable improvement over the pilot in several key ways. While the pilot was a bit scattered and overwhelming, which admittedly it kind of needed to be, episode 2 is the aftermath. It's noticeably more laid back and collected than episode 1, while still remaining the overall vibe and energy it had going on. The animation's already better, the soundtrack is still good, the adventure is interesting, but the main thing I want to focus on is the characters. If the pilot was our introduction to the main circus members and their surface-level shticks, then episode 2 is our introduction to who they are as actual people. Not wacky one-note cartoon characters, but as real human beings who have been stuck in this virtual purgatory together for who knows how long. Regardless of how much screen time or focus they get respectively, each cast member gets at least 1 or 2 moments to shine that shows us a newer, deeper side to them, something that in later episodes, thankfully, is expanded upon even further. The best example of this being, fittingly, Pomni herself. Pomni couldn't really do much during the pilot aside from freak out and ask questions. Episode 2 takes that and shows us that there's more to her than that. She's nervous, she's confused, and she's tired. She's still getting used to this place and she feels separated from the others because of how much they seem like they're used to everything. However, seeing someone else go through something so similar to what she is helps her open up a little. While the person, who isn't even really a person in question, gets snapped out of existence right in front of her later, which does initially shatter the hope she had, that doesn't last. Seeing the other circus members hold and attend Kaufmo's funeral revives that hope in her. This is the start of her learning to adapt to and find some kind of peace in this place. Pomni may be scared, but she isn't a coward.
I miss my wife, Tails. I miss her a lot. I'll be back.
Mystery of Mildenhall Manor, despite not being my favorite episode personally, is still, just as everyone else and their mom said when it came out, really good. As much as I just went on about how much I appreciate that Pomni isn't actually a one-dimensional girl failure, I gotta say, I love it whenever the show lets her get all cartoonishly neurotic and expressive. I love the strain in her voice, I love her crooked body language, I love her facial expressions getting all stretched and warped. Speaking of which, I also really love the scene of Pomni and Kinger's 2D eyes animated in the dark. Something about it is just so fun to watch, and I honestly love it whenever the show does anything really cartoony and expressive with the characters. Side note, I know that the show is literally designed and based around that specific kind of old 90s to early 2000s style of unpolished early fever dream 3D computer graphics, so it would only make sense for the series to be 3D animated, but part of me can't help but mourn what it could have looked like if it was fully 2D animated. I really love the art style for the show's outro, along with all the 2D animated elements that are sprinkled throughout the rest of the episodes, and I can only hope we get to see more of that. What else did people like about this episode again? I feel like I'm forgetting so- Oh, yeah, shit, right. Kinger's really good here. If I had a nickel for every time a cartoon introduced a crazy old man character as a comic relief character, only to then show that he actually has an incredibly tragic backstory with amnesia somehow, I'd have 3 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened thrice, right? I like crazy characters as much as the next person, but what I especially like and appreciate, especially in stories like this, is whenever a character has depth or nuance and reason for their craziness, which is definitely the case with Kinger. This one simple fact and bit of lore about him elevates Kinger so much more as a character, both in the plot and to the audience. And although I personally am not the biggest Kinger fan or enthusiast in the world, credit where credit is due, this episode's awesome and only made me like him even more than I already did. Onto the non-Mildenhall Manor part of this episode, as slightly disappointed as I am that Zooble didn't get quite as much focus in episode 3 as Kinger did, I think what we got is still good. While Zooble tends to come off or present themselves as someone who doesn't give a fuck, doesn't like anyone, and just wants to be left alone, I'd argue that they're actually the most chill, laid-back, and normal person out of any of the circus members, which I'll touch on more later. And Kane... Ooh, boy am I nervous-sighted to see what they're going to do with him. We still don't know very much about Kane, but what little eerie moments we get with him in both episodes 1 and 2, and especially what happens with him in this episode, is terrifying. This guy, as silly and well-meaning at his core and programming as we know him to be, is still, both to the circus members and to us as the audience, almost entirely unpredictable. For now, we can only wait until we get to see where the show is willing to take that. Anywhoosies, with this episode being confirmed as the closest the show will ever get to actual horror and all, there's no way the next episode could be more harrowing somehow, Jesus Christ.
It's called a Manic episode, and you're getting 3 more seasons! Anyway.
Fast Food Masquerade is my personal favorite episode of Digital Circus that we've seen yet, and although I'm honestly not too sure how to go about writing this segment, I'll try to explain why it is. While episode 3 had a more standard, wacky, over-the-top adventure like the episodes before it, episode 4 just has the main circus members, except for Kinger, working at a fast food joint. The setting is almost jarringly mundane and realistic compared to what we and the characters are used to. The uniforms and little to no background music help to amplify this feeling even more. Something else that separates this episode from the previous ones is that Pomni isn't the central focus of the episode. Instead, the spotlight is on Gangle, who up until this point has had little to no attention on her from the show whatsoever. So I think it was only fair to give her her own spotlight episode and let Pomni take a back seat for a moment. I'm gonna be entirely honest, in case you couldn't tell, I love Gangle in this episode, both with and without the plastic mask. Putting her in clothes, let alone a work uniform, along with a more durable mask makes her feel a lot more stable and confident than she usually is. Or, at least those things make it seem that way. Regardless of how much she tries to suppress her feelings or act stronger than she actually is, at the end of the day, it's still just that. Just masking. Yes, it's a pretty on-the-nose allegory, but I don't think it's actually bad by any means. In my opinion, it doesn't matter if a trope or allegory has been done a million times or not. What I do think is important is if it's used effectively to the show or film's advantage. And honestly, I think this episode does a perfectly good job, at doing exactly that. She isn't who she tried to force herself to be here. She's still the same shy, sensitive, and fragile but sweet and artistic person we know her to be. And while, obviously, Zooble or Pomni's help and kindness don't just magically make her issues or insecurities disappear, that doesn't make their efforts any less meaningful. Pomni saw that Gangle wasn't willing to talk about what was troubling her directly, so she did the next best thing she figured would help by letting Gangle off early. It's a very subtle gesture, but I really do think it was for the best.
Cherish the people around you. You never know when they'll be gone. In this world, the worst thing you can do is make someone think they're not wanted or loved.
Guess she ended up taking my advice.
This episode does us a huge favor and follows up on the Zooble stuff they set up last episode by showing us Zooble's dynamic with Gangle. I have a lot to say about it and how I feel about it that I'll talk about later, but this episode alone shows us that Zooble is a genuinely kind, chill, and caring person at heart. And their loyalty and commitment to being there for Gangle when she needs it couldn't have sold me any better on them as a character. This episode is my absolute favorite by a long shot, and I think it would take something that really leaves an impact on me or pleasantly surprises me enough somehow to take its place in that regard.
Ugh, forget it. Let's go to an intermission.
And so, we finally reach the currently newest episode. And the one that Gooseworks has described as, and I quote, "the silly before the storm." Delightful. Untitled is interesting to me. I've been struggling with the script for this part for quite a bit now, so I'm not sure how well the segment will age or how coherent it'll be, but I'll try. Seeing a clusterfuck of adventures in one episode at once like this was really fun and interesting, even if not every adventure, mainly the first two, had all that much going on. The anime adventure genuinely caught me off guard when I was watching the episode on premiere night. I love the art style and animation they went with, and I really like how everyone's designs are translated into the style. Also, side note, but if you look closely at the art on Gangel's desk in this shot, you can see the drawing at her very right is of two girls holding hands with hearts around them. Gangel canonically drawing Yuri was not on my 2025 bingo card, but I'm not complaining. I knew she had it in her. Speaking of things I knew Gangel had in her, Zooble continues to be one of my absolute favorites here, and their interactions with Gangel are even sweeter in this episode than I would have expected. I know it's been stated that Digital Circus won't have any romance or canon shipping, but I feel like if there were to be an exception to that rule that isn't Kinger and Queenie, it would be Zooble and Gangel. Something about their interactions in episode 5 especially feels closer than platonic to me, and at least a little deliberately too. But hey, it's probably not happening anyway, so let's get back on track before I go any further. The bar scene was really cool looking and gave us some interesting insight on the group's personal lives before getting trapped in the circus, even if we didn't get much, if any, info on Jax or Kinger's pasts. Speaking of Jax, while I've never really liked or even particularly cared for him as a character, seeing him actually be a person for a moment was refreshing and explains his behavior a bit. It doesn't excuse it by any means, naturally, but it still makes sense. And Ragatha... oh, Ragatha, you poor sweet soul. Even before episode 5 came out, I've seen a lot of people speculate that Ragatha is going to be the next person in the circus to abstract. Taking into consideration just how much her fawning towards the others, and especially Pomni, tends to have either little to no effect, wither over time, or just outright backfire on her, I can see why people think it might push her over the edge, given how dependent on other people's approval she is. I, at the very least, don't want her to abstract, even if I feel like it's possible she'll at least get really close, similarly to how Gangel seemed to almost lose herself near the end of episode 4. Overall, while it's not my favorite episode, I still enjoyed it quite a bit, and I'm glad that we got this relatively lighthearted episode as a breather considering both the previous episode and what's next to come. And now, finally, the ranking part of the video. If I had to decide, I'd put the pilot in 5th place, episode 2 in 4th place, episode 3 in 3rd place, episode 5 in 2nd, and episode 4 in 1st place. Keep in mind, this could totally change in the future with the more episodes we get, but for now, this is how I'd rank the Digital Circus episodes in order. Oh, you thought I was going to use, like, a tier list to rank them? That's reasonable, I guess. Here's how I'd rank the episodes on a tier list. When I say this, I'm gonna try and make it sound not patronizing, but I really do think that The Amazing Digital Circus is a one-of-a-kind show. It has such a specific, distinct sense of humor, style, and aesthetic and tone that I really haven't seen anywhere else in anything I've watched. I mean, seriously, what lunatic would go out of their way to reference Raggedy Ann and Andy a musical adventure in their own show this often? What I mean by all this, and I guess the entire video, is I like this show. A lot. And despite how weird or kind of hard to sit through some moments or jokes can be, I think it's genuinely one of the best cartoons out right now. The fact that there are, in fact, only 4 episodes left after this is kind of baffling. I can't judge Gooseworks for wanting to keep the series only 9 episodes long to tell this story, but it still feels odd. Either way, I can only hope the show continues being itself in the best way that it can, and I can't wait to see where they take it and where they take these characters. That's all I have to say for now, so I'll be ending this here. Thank you for watching, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments if you want to, and as always, I'll see you eventually. Bye!